Beginning. Okay. Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started in a few minutes. There's lots of good information right up front, so we want to make sure everybody's on. Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started in a few minutes. Thanks for being patient. Good evening, everybody. We're going to start in about 60 seconds. So you have time to grab your popcorn and your water.
All right.
Going to get started here in about 15 seconds.
All right.
6:30. There we go.
Are you ready?
We are ready.
We are.
Fabulous. Welcome, everybody, all our senior parents from D128. I'm Amy Belstra from Libertyville High School, your post-secondary counselor, and I'm joined by
Becky Bolito from Vernon Hills High School, also a post-secondary counselor. Thank you for joining us this evening.
We are super excited about this. This is a new presentation for us and has received rave reviews from our colleagues at other high schools. So we are really excited to introduce you to Karen Nadoff and Alan Press from Shire Law Group, and they will tell you a little bit more about themselves. But this seems like an excellent topic for those of you who are starting to realize that, oh, don't get teary on us, but the end of the school year is fast approaching. Graduation, sending your child off into the next phase of their lives as they are all becoming young adults. So it's a lot of, I know it's all the feels right now. So I think this is going to provide some excellent information for you. Becky, do you want to do any quick housekeeping about Q&A and stuff?
So sure, we don't have the chat open. So if you have a question that you would like addressed, go ahead and throw that into the Q&A, and we will have time at the end to turn it into like more question based. But if it seems pertinent to the moment, we will go ahead and interrupt and throw questions out there. So use the Q&A. And then Karen and Alan, I was wondering, just so everyone knows, we are recording this session and we will be emailing it out to all senior families. Will we also have access to your slides in case people want to access that Okay, so if you're at home taking notes, also know that when we send out the recording, we'll also be able to send out the slide deck. So I think that about covers it. Anything else, Amy?
No, that's it. Karen and Alan, floor is yours.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening for What You Need to Know When Your Child Turns 18. As introduced, I'm Karen Nadoff.
And I'm Alan Preston. We're both partners at Shire Law Group, right down the street in Lincolnshire, Illinois. And we do estate planning. So this is a great topic. We've done this a number of times, and we think you're really going to enjoy it. Please feel free to ask questions. Those will be monitored. And if we don't get to them right away when you post the question, then we can stay around at the end as long as necessary in order to get those questions answered. So thank you so much for joining us. Karen and I both have children that recently in the last few years that went through high school. So we're kind of in the same boat that all of you are in, a little bit, a few years beyond where you're at, but we've been through this as well. So we can definitely relate to all of this information.
So if you have questions after the presentation, after you're thinking about it tonight or tomorrow, and you want to contact us, we really want your questions. We want you to understand the material. It's important material. Feel free to call us at 847-955-9000, or you can email us at Karen, that's with a C, C-A-R-E-N, at shirelawgroup.com, or Alan at shirelawgroup.com. So you're all parents of graduating seniors, and perhaps some of you have some younger children as well who will be graduating in the future or the near future. And to all of those graduating, congratulations to your graduating senior, to you and to your family. It's an exciting time for you all. So for those graduating, some of you are having children who are heading to college, to university. Some of your children are going to be traveling. Some of your children are going to be starting a new job, or perhaps they're moving out to a dorm or to an apartment. And most likely, it's a few of these things. But no matter what direction our children are headed in, there is one thing that we all share in common, and that is when they are turning 18, they are considered legal adults. And with that designation comes some important changes for them, for you, and for your family. And we're going to talk about those changes this evening. This chart demonstrates some of the changes that happen when your child turns 18. Before 18, you could access your child's medical records. So if you had a question about your child's vaccination history, you could call up to the doctor and you could request that information and they would provide that to you. After 18, without proper authorization, that right becomes limited. Before 18, you could make decisions about the course of your child's medical treatment. So if your child tripped or fell or got injured playing a sport, you could go with them to the doctor and you could decide on their medical treatment if it was going to involve a cast or whatever that treatment would involve. And after 18, that right becomes limited without the proper documentation put into place. Before 18, you could speak to your child's doctor. So if your child wasn't feeling well, you could call up the doctor, talk to the nurse, tell them your child's symptoms, and come up with a plan of action, a plan of treatment for your child. And after 18, that right becomes limited, again, without the proper authorization in place. For 18, you could help your child with finances. So if your child had a bank account and there was something that seemed wrong with the bank account and they needed your help or assistance with it, you could go ahead and you could call up the bank on their behalf and find out what was going on. And after 18, without the proper authorization in place, that right becomes limited. Before 18, you could access your child's educational records. And after 18, in certain circumstances, that right also becomes limited without the proper authorization in place. So what's a parent to do? Well, there are 3 essential healthcare and financial power documents that have to be put in place. And we're going to talk about each three of those documents. We're also going to be talking about FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and that involves your access to educational records. We'll spend some time on that this evening. And then when we bring this presentation out to the community, a lot of times we had additional common concerns and questions. So we wanted to bring those questions to you proactively this evening. So Alan's going to touch on wills and trusts. We're going to talk about access to digital assets. We're also going to discuss dorm, apartment, and global insurance. And we will also be looking into health and safety apps. But before that, let's get started with the 3 essential documents regarding healthcare and financial access. So we're going to take each one of these documents one at a time. Those 3 documents are a healthcare power of attorney, a HIPAA authorization, and a power of attorney for property. So I'm going to talk a bit about the healthcare power of attorney and the HIPAA authorization, and then Alan's going to follow with the discussion about the power of attorney for property. So a parent cannot make medical decisions on behalf of their adult child, even in an emergency, unless proper authorization has been put in place. That proper authorization is a healthcare power of attorney. The healthcare power of attorney gives parents or somebody who's designated the authority to make medical decisions on an adult child's behalf. Now, importantly, none of these documents supersede your child's right to make their own decisions. But what if your child can't make their own decisions? Then these documents become essential. So authorization is especially important in the event your adult child is unable to make those decisions on their own. Having this healthcare power of attorney in place avoids the expense and aggravation of potentially having to go to court to get a guardianship. So you can have the ability to make medical decisions on your adult child's behalf. In the midst of a crisis, the only thing you want to be focusing on is being able to help your child at that moment. You don't want to be worried about having the ability to make that decision by having to go to court and get a guardianship. These documents are relatively easy to put in place. And when there's a crisis that occurs, you're going to want this document in place, especially if you have to make medical decisions on the behalf of your adult child. So my very good friend's daughter was going to a large university. It was the first time that she was leaving home. And my friend really wanted to give her some ideas about how she could get acclimated to that large university. So she had recommended that she join an intramural team. Daughter loved to play soccer, seemed like a no-brainer. She was going to join the team. So she went ahead, she joined the team. Everything was going really well. She really enjoyed her teammates, the coach. And at the end of the first week of practice, she collided very badly with another player. So this is her first time away from school. She ends up in an emergency room. She does not understand what is happening. They're new doctors. She's hurt very badly, and she just cannot make her own medical decisions. Fortunately, my friend had the healthcare power of attorney in place, and she was able to very quickly send that to that hospital and have the ability to make decisions on behalf of her child. So without these documents in place, she may not have been able to make those decisions for her when she could not make them on her own. So these documents are extremely, extremely important. That's one example, but we have many, many examples of this similar situations happening. When we do these documents for our clients, we provide electronic copies because providing electronic copies to the hospitals is totally fine. And we always advise that when you get these done, you have them in electronic form that you keep someplace safe where you can access them quickly. Hopefully you never need to use them, but if you do, you want to be able to get to them quickly and send them right off so you can make decisions very rapidly when need be. The second document is a HIPAA authorization. HIPAA stands for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And you probably have heard of HIPAA You've probably filled out your own HIPAA forms when you go to your doctor. The HIPAA forms allow healthcare providers to release and share medical information with designated people. So the power of attorney for healthcare is a decision-making document where who's ever designated can make decisions on behalf of that individual. And HIPAA is just about receiving information. So the HIPAA authorization allows doctors to speak about a student or adult child's medical condition with whomever is designated by that adult child on their authorization. In paragraph 1 of the HIPAA authorization, it says authorized recipients. Anyone who's listed there is going to be able to call the hospital and get information about what is going on. The HIPAA authorization is crucial if your adult child is admitted to a medical facility and you need to get information about their condition, especially if they are not able to speak with you directly about their condition, or maybe they can't fully relay medical information to you because they don't understand what is being told to them. So again, at a time of crisis, your primary concern is going to be that you ensure your child is taken care of. You do not want the potential additional burden of a court proceeding, the associated legal costs, and especially the delay in getting information. You want to get information quickly. Yeah, let's just take a peek at the questions that we have.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions. We're going to break for a second here before we move on. How long is a healthcare power of attorney good for, Karen?
Okay, so the healthcare power of attorney is good. You know, we always say revisit them every 3 to 5 years, but they are good unless you replace them with another one. So one way of terminating these powers of attorney is to do a new one. So in the future, if your child wants to designate different agents or different orders of agents, then they would make a new power of attorney for healthcare, or a new HIPAA authorization, or a new power of attorney for property that Ellen is about to speak about, and that's going to terminate the existing one. But as long as they have one in place, theoretically, those are good. So you don't have to worry about that. And then the other question was, can they be put in place before the child turns 18? And the answer to that is no. You have to wait until your child turns 18. Ellen and I spend many a birthday with 18-year-olds because they come in on their birthday. We try to make it a little special for them that day. We have a little treat for them, but no, they need to wait until they're 18. We do have people that have us prep the documents beforehand, which is fine. And we do have them set for an appointment, but that has to be after they turn 18 because they must be 18 to sign.
And then there's a question about the HIPAA form, the authorization form, and there's been potentially some problems in presenting it because the hospital or medical facility may require their own form. And of course, if the person is able to execute and sign a form, that might be a reasonable request because the hospital or medical provider will have, certain things in their own HIPAA form that might be relative or relevant rather to their facility. Of course, if somebody, where this generic HIPAA comes into play, most importantly, is if somebody winds up in a facility that they weren't anticipating going to, and there's no documents prepared. In that case, we haven't heard of there being a problem of anyone accepting that HIPAA authorization. So I don't know. I just haven't really had a situation where that's happened. But that could be what you're talking about, is that if the person is able to execute a new HIPAA form and the facility has their own format, of course, that's reasonable for them to request that form be filled out as well.
Which is also part of this, when you go again to your doctor's office and you fill out a HIPAA authorization, that HIPAA authorization is not a general HIPAA authorization. Typically, it's just for that particular provider. So these are general HIPAA authorizations. And that is a perfect segue into my example, which is a real life example that I can share with you. I have many examples about my children that are real life examples that I'm happy to share because I know as a parent, these documents I've had to use. And at the time you have to use them, they are extremely important that they are in place. So my son several years ago went to a large university, and probably like some of your kids, he got to school and he, got sick. Kids catch things from other kids. He had a virus that was going around. And I said to him, go to the University Health Services, get seen. And he said, no, 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 I'm fine. And then as he got worse through the week, he said, oh, I can't get an appointment, or I have a class, or I have a study group, or I have an event. And things progressed and he didn't really take care of himself until I got a call on a Saturday in the middle of the night saying, Mom, I'm going to the emergency room. Don't worry. My friend is taking me. I have my cell phone, but I realized it's not charged and it's about to lose all its charge. But don't worry. I have my friend and he'll keep you updated. So, of course, I'm panicked at this point, and I am waiting for a text, waiting for a text. And finally, I get a text from his friend who says, we did get to the emergency room. My son's phone was completely out of battery. And he said, I can't give you any information. They won't tell me anything because I'm not authorized. I'm just sitting here in the waiting room. So I quickly called the hospital and talked to the nurses station. And they said, we're sorry. We can't even tell you if your son was admitted or not unless we have the proper authorization in place. So I had my documents front and center on my computer. I electronically sent them out. What seemed like moments, to go seemed like a much longer amount of time. I called back to the nurses station and they said, we're so sorry. We had to get these documents in place. Now that we have them, we can tell you what's going on. So I could not get any information with having these documents not available to the hospital until I sent them out to them. So I cannot emphasize, and we will tell you, we know many instances of this, that these documents are so important. Again, they're relatively easy to put in place. So you can see that they really become essential because once your child turns 18, your access to this information is limited without these authorizations from them.
So before we move on, let's see a couple. Does the power of attorney need to be notarized? And we're going to talk a little bit about this, but yes, I mean, these documents, many of them have requirements to either be witnessed or notarized or both. That's why we do recommend, if you're doing this yourself with forms online, make sure that you're aware of those requirements. Each form's got a different requirement. Also, use in other states may have requirements as well. I know with, Florida sometimes has more stringent requirements on some of these documents. So you want to make sure, I mean, the best thing to do is to witness and notarize everything, even if it's not required, because it really can't hurt. So that's pretty much our policy here at Shire Law Group.
That's sort of our philosophy too, because what if a child is traveling and they happen to be in Florida? So we do the extra witnessing, the extra notarization, even though some of those might not be necessary in Illinois. We want to make sure that it's going to be covered by all the states.
And then do we have to go through lawyers to get the healthcare power of attorney and the HIPAA authorization? And the answer is no. So none of the things that we're talking about this evening would require a lawyer. Of course, we are lawyers, so we're going to tell you that we highly recommend that you utilize lawyers to prepare the documents, because then the lawyer will be responsible for making sure that they're properly drafted, number one, properly executed, and are up to date and relevant to the situation. So, this is not meant to be a sales pitch, just information, but we do have a special program for this. You certainly can go to your family attorney, or we'll talk a little bit later about our program and the way that we've set that up, but they're not expensive. So using an attorney is not such a bad idea. And then finally, we have a question: can these be put into place with emergency conditions? 24-year-old. So we're going to talk about whether or not these forms are effective in all 50 states. And the answer is going to be yes. But as far as these are statutory forms, at least the healthcare power of attorney is, and the power of attorney for property that I'm going to go over are Illinois statutory forms. So these, can be used, however, in all 50 states. The HIPAA form is more of a generic form that we prepare for our clients, but you can put conditions and special things in the documents. And that's one of the things as lawyers that we can do for you. So if there are special requirements or things that need to be spelled out above and beyond the statutory forms, we certainly can help you with that. In our office, we actually include additional powers that are above and beyond the statutory form. So we're going to move on. We're going to come to these other questions at the end. So don't go away.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that. We promise. So we're going to switch over for a minute to go to, or for a few minutes to go talk about the power of attorney for property. So this is a financial power of attorney. So think of property not only in the sense of real property or real estate, but anything that is financial related. So this document is going to allow parents to manage their adult children's finances. If it becomes especially important if a child becomes injured or ill and is unable to make their own financial decisions. If a bank account, a car, or any other assets that are titled in the name of the adult child need to be handled during a period of any incapacity, having the power of attorney in place is going to avoid the need to have a guardianship, right? So that's really what these documents are aiming to do, because if you don't have these documents in place and something happens to your adult child and you need to make a medical or financial decision for them, your only remedy at that point, if they're over the age of 18, may be to petition the court to become their legal guardian. So these forms allow you to provide for that protection without having to worry about going to court, avoiding a public proceeding, and all of those other things that go with the benefits of preparing these private documents. So if an adult child is not able to access their bank account, or there's an issue, then the person holding the power of attorney is going to be able to handle that for them. It could also handle a bunch of other things like, dealing with the IRS or a state taxing body, dealing, of course, with any financial accounts. We add in our form, in addition to the statutory form, a whole section regarding digital assets, because obviously today that's becoming much more important, but that is not included on the statutory form. So that's an area where we add things. Also, many powers may not be available to an agent, even under a power of attorney, unless they're specifically spelled out in the form. So we're keyed in on what those are, and we add those to the form to make sure that the form is going to be as broad as possible and allow the agent acting under the power of attorney to do whatever is necessary to help the incapacitated or unavailable adult child. So, and I've already brought this up, but powers of attorney for property and digital assets, this is a very important area. You want to make sure that your power of attorney covers this area. So if it's necessary in order to attempt to obtain a password or get access to something that is in digital format or is online or in the cloud, that's something that's going to be spelled out specifically in the document in order to allow the agent to assist the adult child. So here we are at the question, let's say, your child, we live in Illinois, but maybe they're going to university or college in California or Minnesota, or they're going to Texas or Florida. Are these documents that you prepare here in Illinois going to work there? And the answer is yes. As long as they're validly executed here in Illinois, then they're going to be honored in all 50 states. Now, after graduation, the child decides that they're going to take their first job and, permanently move to Tennessee. Is that something where they might want to consider updating their documents to Tennessee documents? Sure, that would be a normal thing to do, and probably a good time to think about updating the documents. We're fans of making sure, even for all of our clients, that powers of attorney are kept fresh and updated every 3 to 5 years anyway. They don't have an expiration date though, so going back to that prior question, just because a power of attorney is older than that doesn't make it bad. I want to point that out, but we're fans of making sure that they're being kept up to date, they're still relevant and still doing what they're supposed to do.
Just wanted to touch, this might be a good place for us to answer the question about whether these are good out of the country. And we can't guarantee that these are good out of the country, but what we always recommend is that if your child is going abroad, that you talk to the person who's in charge of that program and ask them, wherever your child might be going, are they going to honor the powers of attorney and healthcare directives that have been set up in the United States? And then if they say yes, terrific. And if they say no, then the question is, what do we need to put in place to do that? So the people who organize these trips are going to be the ones that you would want to direct those questions to make sure that your child is situated with any proper documentation that might be needed while they're abroad. Oh, congratulations.
So my son is attending school in Florida and we're moving to Tampa in June. Well, because June, he probably wouldn't have started college yet and the whole family's moving to Florida. Yeah, I mean, I think I might consider using a Florida attorney. Why not? Of course, that doesn't mean that they couldn't prepare them here before you left and have them ready to go. Would they still be valid in Florida? The answer would be yes. So either way that you're comfortable, but certainly if you're going to be moving the entire family there anyway, that's not a bad idea.
Yes, as far as handling healthcare insurance matters, that's part of the HIPAA authorization that's spelled out in there. So you would have access to be able to do that if you are named as an authorized recipient to do that. It's a quote unquote covered entity that is being allowed to give you information about the protected health of your child. So
yeah, this becomes more of an issue because I know when parents try to call up and inquire about insurance coverage, a lot of the insurance companies are going to ask for a HIPAA authorization to be allowed to discuss that,
Yep.
even though it's your insurance.
Yep, that's specifically in there. Okay, so basically, you can see from all of this information that having this power of attorney for healthcare, the HIPAA authorization, and the power of attorney for property is all about peace of mind. These documents allow you to make immediate decisions and give you access to critical information if a crisis occurs. Again, if a crisis occurs, all you want to be able to do is focus on the situation at hand. Documents are easy to put in place. They should be among the top of everyone's list once their child is 18, and copies of the documents should be kept in a safe and easily accessible place. Like we mentioned earlier, we always provide electronic copies when we do these for our clients. If you get them done elsewhere, make sure you have electronic copies on your computer. You know how to access them. You know where they are. You do not need originals for these documents. Electronic copies are just fine, but you'll keep the original, you'll keep the copy at home in a safe place, and having electronic copies, if you need to send them off, is going to be most likely what you do. And then I know there's a question about, pricing, and at the end we'll discuss at least how we handle that. So we're going to switch gears for a moment and talk about access to educational records. That is governed by FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And in addition to the ability to access your child's medical information and make decisions regarding their health and help them out with financial affairs being limited, also your right to their educational record access becomes limited once they become legal adults at the age of 18. And this chart shows some of those differences. Before 18, you could view your child's educational records, and after 18, that right may be limited. Before 18, you can request a correction to your child's educational records, and after 18, that right becomes limited without the proper authorization in place. Before 18, you can decide who can see your child's educational records, and after 18, that right becomes limited without the proper authorization in place. And before 18, you can get photocopies of your child's educational records, and after 18, that right becomes limited without the proper authorization in place. So there's a common theme here: proper authorization. That proper authorization is written consent. There is actually a FERPA authorization form. We also do these for our client. You can also get them online. These forms go to the registrar, whatever university your child is going to, and your child, through these forms, gives you the authorization to receive information that the university deems to be appropriate about their educational records. There is a huge misconception that this is all about access to grades. It is far more important than that. If your child is having a difficult time and confides in an administrator at school, that administrator would not be able to share with you, even when they felt like it was necessary, unless there was a FERPA authorization in place. When your child signs up for school, they might just check a box that has FERPA authorization on it. Sometimes the FERPA authorization is more expansive, and it talks about them consenting to having their image on some kind of marketing, or having their name or their phone number published in some kind of directory. But the FERPA itself for every school, if you're not sure if your school has a FERPA authorization that your child has checked off a box, call the registrar's office, ask them. If there's not a FERPA in place that that school has, get a FERPA authorization in place. They're very, very important to have. They don't need to be witnessed. They don't need to be notarized. So now we're going to dive into some common concerns that we discussed at the top of the presentation. But first, we're going to look at some questions.
Okay.
Yes, it is being recorded. Yes, that is correct. So now we're going to look at some common concerns that have been brought to us when we've done this presentation for different high schools. And as we said at the top of the presentation, we wanted to share those with you. So Alan's going to talk a bit about wills and trusts and access to digital assets. And then I'm going to follow up and have a brief discussion on dorm, apartment, and global insurance and health and safety apps.
Thanks, Karen. So people ask, well, we're doing these powers of attorney and healthcare directives. Does my adult child, still need to have a will or a trust? And of course, the answer is going to be, it just kind of depends on your child's situation. Certainly, if they have their own wealth, maybe they have inherited money, or they had a very successful business during their time in high school, and they've accumulated some assets and wealth in their own name, that might be something that would be prudent. But let's take a brief look at what these documents are and what the differences are between them and the powers of attorney that we've already discussed, particularly the power of attorney for property or finances that I discussed a few minutes ago. Keep in mind that the powers of attorney are typically only valid during lifetime. And to contrast that, a will is a document that's only going to be effective after death. So a will is not triggered until somebody dies. And we all know what a will is, maybe old episodes of Dynasty or Dallas or something, where somebody dies and they have a reading of the will, and basically it's a document that states to whom you want to leave your assets to, right? So I'm married. In my will, I may say that I want to leave everything to my spouse if she survives me, otherwise to my children in equal shares. And then my wife might have a similar will that's leaving everything to me, unless I predeceased her, and then otherwise everything in equal shares to our kids. So that's what a will is. A trust is a document as well, but that document is something that becomes effective immediately. So it's effective during lifetime, like a power of attorney, and it's also effective after death. So that's kind of a good way to look at these documents and differentiate them. So a trust can handle planning for incapacity or disability, as well as planning for what you want to have happen after somebody passes away. So the question remains, though, does my 18-year-old need to have a will or a trust in place? Well, a couple of questions. Does your child have significant amount of assets that are in their own name? Because there also are other ways to handle assets if a child were to pass away. They could have an account that's payable on death to somebody. They could have joint assets. So if you're on a bank account, let's say with your adult child, and they were to become incapacitated or pass away, you're a co-owner on that account. So of course, you have the ability, by virtue of being a co-owner, to handle that account with them and for them if they're unable to do it for themselves. And you're also able to handle that after death as well. Also, the other thing to keep in mind are beneficiary designations. So if your adult child has a life insurance policy and they've named beneficiaries in the policy, that doesn't have to go through a will or a trust, because that's a contract that your adult child has with the insurance company to pay the beneficiaries upon his or her death, and to have the proceeds payable directly without going through a will or a trust or any other type of mechanism. So again, it's an answer of, it kind of depends on the situation. I'd say most 18-year-olds don't need a will or a trust. A good time to address this for them might be when they start the next chapter in their life, which might be, having a significant other or getting married or whatever the situation is. Of course, starting a family is a really important time to get some of these documents done, so you could provide, for guardianship for your minor children. So that's something that might come down the road. If you have any questions on this, of course, feel free to reach out to Karen and I, either through email or just giving us a call. We're happy to discuss it with you, and remind you too that not only does your 18-year-old perhaps need one of these documents, but certainly you do as well if you don't already have it done. Okay, and then let's also briefly touch on digital assets. And this is something that we address when we prepare trusts for clients as well, because we want a successor trustee to be able to have access to digital assets. So we duplicate a lot of these powers into different documents, so we make sure we're not leaving anything uncovered. We want to make sure that we're covering this from 360 degrees, right? So we've got it going all around. So what happens to, this is a good question, what happens to bank accounts titled under the Uniform Gift to Minors Act once your child turns 18? Does the parent automatically get dropped as a custodian? No, there's some paperwork that probably needs to be filled out. I went through this a couple of times with my kids. In these accounts, your kids actually become the legal owners once they're 18, but the banks don't necessarily notify you about that. You may have to be proactive, or they may have to be proactive, but maybe they can't be because you haven't told them about the account, and that's fine too. I think on I just changed one actually last week for my daughter, and she is 21. So we're 3 years late on getting that account switched over to her name. But that, depending on whomever the bank or the financial institution is, they may have different procedures on how to handle this. But I haven't noticed that they proactively are keyed in on the birthday there. I think
I had the same experience
I
with
think you
my
have to,
daughter.
I think you have to kind of let them know and then get the account switched over to them when they're 18. So of course, if it's a lot of money and you don't want your kids to get it when they're 18, you may want to consider creating a trust for that purpose. And that's something, of course, that you can talk to us about at any time.
All right, so we're going to switch over to dorm, apartment, and global insurance. So when you're getting a list together about all the things you need to do with your senior who's heading off, put this on your list to check into. So things happen, and you want to insure yourself with dorm, apartment, rental insurance, global insurance if your child's going to be traveling. And interestingly enough, these standalone policies for dorm, apartment, and rental insurance are relatively inexpensive. Now, if you have a homeowner's policy, you might want to check it, see what that covers, compare it to the standalone policies, check out the deductibles, which makes more sense to you, do a little bit of research that way. We don't really advocate one insurance company over another one, just that this is something that you look into. One of the reasons that we introduced this into the presentation is because I have a personal experience with the importance of having renter insurance, dorm, apartment, and rental insurance. My daughter went to school in the middle of Pennsylvania, very, very cold there. And before she left, we told her, as we told my son, never leave your computer alone. Everything, their world is on that computer, their notes, their papers, everything. And even though you don't want to think about it, things happen, and you want to just make sure that you have your computer with you. You just don't leave it someplace public. So they heeded that lesson, and we got my daughter situated, middle of Pennsylvania. She actually went to Penn State. She has her warm coat and her warm gloves. She's got her computer, and she had her favorite place she liked to study at the library. And in the middle of winter, she trotted off to the place that she liked to study. And unlike when I went to school, I don't know about all of you, but they didn't have like Uber Eats and delivery. And she was at the library and she was hungry and she ordered some food. So she took her computer because she knew that she needed to take it with her. And she went downstairs to get the food. She came back upstairs to her favorite spot, and her very expensive winter coat was missing. Somebody had taken it. So not only was she upset that somebody would take her coat, which, she felt like she was in a very safe environment, but now it's freezing outside and she doesn't have a coat to wear, and she's very upset. And she calls, and we had this apartment dorm rental insurance, and it covered the cost of her coat and the replacement. All she needed to do was file a police report. And with literally by the week, midweek, she had a replacement coat. So the insurance policy paid for itself. There's many, many insurance policies. They cover different things. They might cover theft or damage if they drop something. So just check out the different policies, see what's going to work for you. Check your homeowners, check the standalone policies, and see what might work for you.
And I know a lot of kids too are traveling this summer, maybe going to Europe. I know my daughter is graduating from college this year, and she missed out on studying abroad junior year because of COVID. And she's planning a trip for this summer and is looking into travel insurance because of COVID, trying to find policies that would, refund her costs if COVID interrupted the trip or made it impossible to go on.
And
So,
look around to ask others that you trust, what they're using, what their experience is, and find something that would fit well with your needs. Thanks. All right, this is something that we really enjoy bringing, because this is something that is literally at your fingertips that many people don't know about. This is the medical ID app. And if you have an iPhone, you will see on your home screen this icon, this white box with a little red heart in the middle. If you do not have an iPhone or you have a different type of smartphone, you can download a similar medical ID health app onto your phone. This allows first responders to bypass a lock screen, whether it's facial recognition or a numerical code, and get into whatever information you have placed into the app. So this is especially important if there's an allergy to a specific medicine or food or a condition that a first responder might need to know about. So you can put as much information as you want in there as you're comfortable with. Again, we don't advocate what should be put in there or how much should be put in there, but we wanted to bring it to your attention, not just for your young adults, but for everybody in your family. Again, especially if there's some type of medical need that would be important for a first responder to know. They are trained to look for this app. They are trained to go into it and see what information may be in there. And also, we want to talk about safety apps. We get this question a lot. There are numerous safety apps. If you go on and you Google safety apps, you are just going to get a plethora of them. But it's very important that you vet the apps before you download them. So ask a trusted friend or your young adult what their friends are going to be using. I know when my daughter went to school and my son went to school, we liked Life 360. There's also Find My Friends. You can track an Uber ride. You can track a walk. So there's a lot of apps out there that can give you peace of mind and your young adult peace of mind as well. And a lot of times they have to be downloaded on both ends, but definitely look into this, see what's going to work for you and your family. And again, vet them before you download them, but always a good idea to ask trusted other people who you can leave in their assessment of these types of apps to see what's going to make sense for you and your family.
okay, and let's talk a little bit about planning remotely. So I'm hoping that this slide, we can take it out one day. We're hopefully getting there soon, right? But during COVID and all of that, of course, we were doing things remotely. We have a whole, and this is where we'll talk a little bit about our program because this ties in pretty nicely. We created an entire web portal that we can direct your young adult to go to fill in a questionnaire. We get the information back in our office. We prepare all of the documents, and then we have a 30 or 40-minute meeting with your adult child, either online or in our office. And we explain all the documents to them so that they're comfortable. And then we have them signed and we make sure that they're witnessed and notarized properly. So we have all that set up. Our program costs $300. We do it as a service to the community. And it's only available, of course, to young adults. So anyone who's college age or younger. So if you have someone who's a junior in college and they haven't done this yet, of course, we would be able to help them as well. We have other programs for older kids and, for lack of a better term, regular adults as well, our regular clients. But this is a special service that we do for the community. So if you don't have these documents in place, now is a great time to do that. You want to ensure that you and your family are protected with proper powers of attorney and healthcare directives that are going to have the powers in them that are necessary so that you may act on their behalf. We can't stress enough the importance of pre-planning to avoid crisis planning, right? Because once these documents can't be signed anymore, they can't be signed anymore. So if it's too late, it's going to be too late, and you might be forced to go the guardianship route, which is not going to be as pleasant, and it's going to be much more time consuming and expensive. So consider putting these together. The forms are the Illinois statutory short form power of attorney for property and the Illinois statutory short form power of attorney for healthcare are available online. But again, we caution you, considering the low cost that this might be available either through our firm or through another attorney that you might want to use. We feel it's a really good investment to get this done professionally. They're not very expensive, and it just gives you peace of mind that it was actually done properly, because if the documents are not proper, then there's a very high likelihood that they won't be accepted or won't be valid.
So some of the most important gifts that you can protect your adult child with are that power of attorney for healthcare. So if your child is unable to make their own medical decisions, this is a designation of who can step in on their behalf to make those decisions. A HIPAA authorization authorizing those who are permitted to get protected health information. That power of attorney for property, naming individuals who can help out with financial affairs. That FERPA form, so a consent form to access educational records. A will or a trust if it's advisable. Check into that insurance, see if it makes sense for you and your family. Check out the medical ID app and safety apps and see which ones might make sense for your family as well. So we're going to take a few questions.
So the signing, there's strict requirements for remote signing. So we do it through Zoom and we have to record it and we have to comply with a bunch of requirements, but it needs to be an ink signature at this point. We're hoping that, that changes in the future as Illinois catches up with technology. Also, can a student sign the documents remotely? The answer is yes. They have to be in the state of Illinois, though, when that's done. So this is something that you probably want to get completed either before they leave for college, or if they're already in college, when they're home for break. We get busy during those vacation breaks when people come in to sign. But they do need to be in the state of Illinois, even if they're signing remotely. So that is a requirement to keep in mind.
And please feel free to call us if you have additional questions. We're always happy. There's no obligation to answer questions. We do this because we know how important it is, and we want to make sure that all of your questions are answered. You can call us, you can email us. We're always happy to get your questions.
All right.
Yes. And then just a question about the Hyatt Legal Plan Network. We're happy to prepare a detailed invoice, and if you can get reimbursed from Hyatt, that's great for you, but we're not part of the plan network. So. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ellen and Karen? Now would be the time to ask.
We also want to thank you for organizing this and having us this evening. It was really a pleasure to be able to get this information out to so many people in the community. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I would say too, that a lot of times when I view a presentation like this, I always think of questions like after it's over. I'm like, geez, I should have asked that question. So please feel free to reach out to us. You don't have to be hiring us for us to help. If we can help you out, we're happy to. And so please, if a question comes up after the fact, feel free to reach out to us at any time.
I know I learned a ton. I was actually setting up my health app on my smartphone. And
That's great.
So we got a question, what I missed, what is the cost? So again, our cost at our firm is $300. That's for the 4 forms, the healthcare power of attorney, the HIPAA authorization, the power of attorney for property, and the FERPA. And that includes, of course, reviewing the documents with your young adult, explaining everything to them, having them sign it, getting it witnessed, getting it notarized, signed, sealed, delivered, scanned, mailed, anything you can think of.
And
So
again,
it's all there.
however you get these documents done, keep them electronically in a place that you know where they are so you can access them quickly.
Awesome. This was super informative and I took away a lot. I'm sure our parents, have a better grasp of all the things to be thinking about. Thank you for offering, follow-up questions and, thank you for spending your evening with our families. Everyone who's still on this call, if you missed it at the beginning, we did say that this presentation is being recorded. And so Amy and I will email that out to all senior families as soon as the recording is available. And we'll include the slide deck that Karen and Alan shared during their presentation so that if you miss something, you'll have it there. Amy, am I forgetting anything?
no, this was amazing. I
Yeah, it
really
was great.
appreciate your time.
Well, thank you so much.
Our
We really
pleasure.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And congratulations to everybody in their graduation. If for all you seniors out there, it's got to be a very exciting time. And for all you parents out there, we feel for you. We've been through this ourselves with our kids heading off to college. It's an exciting time, but bittersweet for sure. But it's all good stuff.
All
So,
good stuff.
so good luck to everybody and congratulations.
Thanks, Karen and Alan.